I want to talk about something difficult and confusing. Identity. Take my identity. It's difficult. Or certainly it seems to be, if you've been watching the BBC quiz programme, pointless. I am, it turns out, a pointless answer. My identity, they had a picture of me, not one single person knew who I was. So I have a pointless identity. But it's also a confusing identity. BBC Home Editor. Seems to be a bit confusing. I get press releases for skirting boards. I get sent samples of laminate floor coverings. Interesting videos are sent to me on piping and plumbing. I had a great press release the other day. It was headlined, Doors. How they make a difference to your home. Yeah, home. That's the confusion. Home editor, home. But home is such a lovely word. You know, it's a warm, welcoming word. It feels nice in your mouth. Home, say it. Home. It's like a polo mint, isn't it? It's sort of a welcome. And actually the word home is really important when we're thinking about identity. It is, if you like, that home is the sort of bedrock of who we are, who we think we are. So certainly for me. So when I was a little boy, that's me there with my younger brother. And this is the way, and you may do the same kind of thing, this is the way that I used to identify myself. So Mark Easton, 24 Lead Camrock Road. Is this working? So 24 Lead Camrock Road, Bears Den, Glasgow. Yes, Glasgow, Scotland. So yeah, I was born in Scotland. Might be a surprise to some of you. United Kingdom, Europe, the world, the solar system, the galaxy. You get the idea. Now, I think this is an interesting list because actually right now, I think Britain is thinking really hard about how far down that list we go. I mean, these are a bit like layers of an onion, aren't they? But how far do we go? Am I just 24? Is it my bedroom? Is that my identity? That's where it stops? Or does it go down to Europe, the world, and am I a citizen of the universe? So I think for Britain, this year, 2014 actually, is going to be a year when we think enormously hard. We're going to have to make some real decisions about our identity. Why? Well, obviously, immigration. It's such a huge topic. Politicians almost talk about nothing else. They know that it worries the public hugely, particularly with the potential arrival of Romanians and Bulgarians this year. It's right at the top of the political topics and will continue to be so throughout the year. And then, of course, we've got the European elections in May, when the UK Independence Party is expected to do very well. Again, this is about our identity. It's about our relationship with our European neighbours. How European do we feel? And then later in the year, we've got the Commonwealth Games and we've got the World Cup. That's going to make people think about their identity too. But we've also got, of course, the Scottish referendum on independence. And that absolutely is about who we think we are. What is our identity, our relationship with the others on these islands? So who do we think we are? Yeah, that's going to be the key theme, I think, for 2014. Do we want to wrap ourselves in the Union flag or some other flag? Do we think of ourselves as Europeans? Do we think of ourselves as citizens of the world? Do we reach out society beyond borders? Or are we actually thinking about how independent we are? What's specific and exclusive to who we are? And because this has become such an important topic, not just this year, but in recent times, in the last census in 2011, there was a specific question for the first time asking us about our national identity. How would you describe it? Are you English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish, British, something else, maybe a mixture? And actually, when you got the answers back, it was interesting. About 2 out of 10 people said they were British. So one could argue that actually Britishness is a dying identity. So if we go through it. So English, actually in England, 60% of people said they were English. In Wales, 58% of people said they were Welsh. In Scotland, 62% of people said they were Scottish. So actually, in those 3 parts of the UK, pretty similar scenes, sort of 6 out of 10 people sort of allying themselves with that part of the United Kingdom. Then you've got Northern Ireland. I will put it up, 21% for completely different story in Northern Ireland. Bit complicated, not going to go into it now. But actually what this does tell you is about 2 out of 10 people regard themselves as British. And you could think, from looking at that statistic, that Britishness is an identity that's dying, being replaced by English, Welsh, and Scottish. But actually, I did something. I went and dived into that data, had a closer look, and looking at the England and Wales figure, about the people who describe themselves as British. And if we take the under 60s, 20%, actually a little bit over 20%, describe themselves as British. Not a fantastic performance, but it is 20%. But what about that generation who lived through the war, the over 75s, the generation that saw the sun set on the British Empire? How did they feel about being British? And of course the answer was 13% of them. So is this an identity that's dying? Younger people tend to be more British than older people. And there are other interesting things about it. So if you look at ethnicity, the ethnic group least likely to describe themselves as British are the white British. Only 14% of white British people describe their national identity as British. And yet among black Britons and Asian Britons, it was over 50%. It's a really interesting phenomenon. This is an identity that is inclusive, that people want to be part of. If they've got a mixed background, so I'm Scottish, you know that now, or born in Scotland, but brought up in England. I think there's probably some Welsh and Irish blood in my veins too. And so British works for me. It is an inclusive identity. It's one that welcomes me and others with a complex heritage in, whereas it's different with other identities. So I think that there are, if you like, but before I come into that, I want to talk to you about those attitudes. So we look among the generations, again, we look at immigration. I talked about that being one of the big themes this year. You look actually who thinks it's the most important issue affecting Britain. Among those born before 1945, 41% think it's the most important issue. And yet among young people, born 1980 to 2000, just 22% think that's the most important issue. Big generational difference. We look now at the European Union. Again, with that the generation, don't forget, who lived through the war, who saw that carnage, that actually was the real reason why we created the European community and the European Union. Actually, 60% of them think we should leave the EU, and among 18 to 24-year-olds, it's 32%. So 32% among that. Big difference in age groups, attitudes, depending on your generation, really. And I think there are these two kinds of identity. There are the exclusive identities, and then there are inclusive identities. And that's really what I wanted to explore today. So if we think about an exclusive identity, I think Englishness sees itself as an exclusive identity. It tends to be people who were born or certainly bred in England would describe themselves as English. It's predominantly white Anglo-Saxon identity. And yet British identity, as I've been discussing, is something that anyone can come to with a more complicated heritage, as I've got, and perhaps many of you in this room have got. That feels an identity that people can accept. And that's why I think actually Britishness is a very contemporary 21st century identity. It makes sense in the modern age. So I think you have got this tension you've got with we see it all the time now. In a world that's becoming more globalized, more multicultural, there is an anxiety there that maybe who I am, what defines me, is going to kind of get lost, absorbed in some kind of multicultural, multinational soup. And that, I think, is to an extent driving some of the fierce nationalism that we're seeing around the place. But at the same time, and this is something that I'm really interested to hear what you think. I think we're also seeing the development of more inclusive identities. And there is that tension, and it's going to be driving a lot of what's happening in the news in the years to come. So, I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm an Arsenal fan, and I can tell you that Arsenal are kicking off in a little over an hour against Fulham. And because they are, I am wearing my Arsenal lucky socks. And Arsenal really matters to me. I mean, ludicrously, I weep, I cheer, I shout, I mourn, mostly mourn. But it is something that really goes to my... You ask me who I am. You look at my blog site, I'll say I'm an Arsenal fan. That's very much part of who I am. But these slides tell us something I think, very interesting about the Arsenal identity. When I sit in my seat at the Emirates, I look around and there's the banner for gay Gooners. And another one for Arsenal Indonesia. That's not actually the Emirates, but they do have one there. And there are many other nationalities spread around the stadium. Arsenal's whole brand, it is Arsenal for everyone, embracing diversity and equality. It is an inclusive idea. I look around the people sitting next to me. There's people from every part of London, every part of life, old and young. If you go to the Arsenal shop, you can buy an Arsenal baby grow, for goodness sake. But equally, you'll see at the ground, many 90-year-old fans, even some centenarians, who come and watch Arsenal play. And of course, it's not just Arsenal. I mean, there are other football clubs that have the same kind of following: Barcelona, Real Madrid, AC Milan, Man United are the biggest one of all, God knows why. 350 million fans around the world. That is a global coming together, a global identity. People want to wear the shirt. They want to wave the flag. It's a powerful sense of identity. And it is, as I think I used the word just now, it is a global brand. And I think you can take this idea of inclusive identities a little bit further. So actually, it is about brands. It is about the trainers you wear, the phone you carry, the car that you drive. Actually, they're all part of an inclusive identity. We want to be something bigger than ourselves, something that expresses our personality, that says something about us, but ties in with something global. And actually, I think you could go one stage further and argue that actually social media, that Facebook and Twitter allow us to have global identity. They are global collectives in a way. They allow you to have a global identity, to spread as far as you want. That really is society beyond borders. If you remember, a couple of years ago, the Coney 2012 campaign. So this was just something that just suddenly became viral on social media. There were 98 million hits for the Coney 2012 campaign on YouTube alone, tens of millions on other sites. That's about global consciousness. That is about global awareness. It is about global identity. But it's a mistake to see it just as that, of course, because social media also allows you to be exclusive. You can actually have people who are only like you around you. You can surround yourself with people who are like you. So in a way, there is a tension there, isn't there, between the exclusive and the inclusive identity. And it's, as I said earlier, you could see it in generational terms. An older generation, conservative, who wants things to be familiar, anxious about change. And a young generation becoming increasingly, I think, tolerant of difference, wanting to embrace the wider world. And I think there is a tension there, but it's beyond that, isn't it? Because actually, it's within us all. Identity, if you like, is by definition exclusive. It's who we are, and it's also who we are not. I'm an Arsenal fan. I am not a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Let me tell you, I am. So it is, identity is about putting some kind of ring around ourselves. So there is a paradox there that we are both exclusive and inclusive. And we look around and we see the development of these exclusive identities, increasingly with groups on the far right and elsewhere, people wanting to make sure that they put a marker around themselves. But also, and this is a positive sign, I think, the development of inclusive societies, that people want to join hands. They want to reach out across boundaries. They want to be part of a society beyond borders. Thank you very much indeed.